And join me in the studio now is Andreas Krieg. He's a political risk analyst and an assistant professor at King's College in London. Thank you very much for coming here today. Firstly, can you explain the significance of this decision by the ICJ?
Well, I mean, it's a moral victory for the most part for the Qataris. They were trying to make the case for more than a year that the UAE and other blockading countries have taken illegal action against the Emirate. And the Qataris were trying to find a remedy to it. And now, finally, they've got an official judgment by the highest and most important UN court saying that this is actually legal action against, as part of the Anti-Discrimination Convention, that at least what the UAE have done is very much in violation of international law. The question then is, to what extent, you've alluded to this already, to what extent is that enforceable? And the problem with the ICJ is that most of their rulings are not compulsory, especially not when the countries have not made a declaration that they will agree to the ruling to be compulsory. And the UAE have said from the beginning, and they've never really made it out, that they would ever abide by an ICJ ruling. And that is pretty much the problem with it. It's not really enforceable.
But saying that, you've called this a moral victory. So does this mean that it could give momentum for Qatar to bring up other issues caused by the blockade on an international stage?
I mean, this is a relatively minor issue. For the Qataris, this is a huge issue. The way it has affected their own people in Saudi Arabia as well as in the UAE. This particular ruling only applies to the UAE because the other blockading countries are not signatories to the ICJ. But in the UAE is roughly 4,000 people who are being affected by it, Qatari nationals. And for them, it's supposed to give them a bit of a relief. But this is all this is about. It's not about whether the blockade is illegal or not. And it's also not really, it doesn't really give any precedence, sets any precedence for other countries to say, putting pressure on the UAE and the blockading countries to find a resolution to it. Plus, we shouldn't forget that so far the UAE have somewhat been resistant to any sort of outside pressure in this particular question on the Qatar crisis. Even someone like Donald Trump, where the UAE have a very intimate relationship with, has made it clear and put pressure on Abu Dhabi to say, end this now, because it's redundant. And the UAE have so far not really followed suit. And, why would an ICJ ruling do that now? Probably it won't, because the UAE have a very long history of basically disregarding international law, disregarding international norms when it comes to what they're doing in Yemen, Somalia, and other parts around the Middle East. That particular one, this Qatar crisis, is about national interest for the UAE, and I don't think they're going to compromise on that.
And can you give us an idea of the wider humanitarian issue caused by this blockade for Qatar, which it can perhaps highlight through this?
I mean, the humanitarian aspect is one aspect of it, which is obviously very important. Within the tribal, very intimate, very tightly knit tribal fabric of the region, where people are always living and have always lived in a transnational environment, where borders never really mattered. Having borders set up like this, where families have intermarried across borders and they never really cared about nationality, this is a huge impact on the psyche of Gulfis in general, not just Qataris, on all sides. Saudis and Emiratis have also suffered from this because they've never in history been confronted with such a very severe impact on the way they freedom of movement, their freedom to do business and their freedom to travel.
Andreas Krieg, thank you so much for coming in today. Great to have your thoughts. Thank you.
Pleasure.